Hello, and welcome to Co-Ed for Kids Facebook Live. Thank you for joining us today, and it's our hope that you'll find some tips and information that you can share with friends and family as we talk about supports and social connections as our protective factor today. I wanted to recap for a few minutes. Anne Brandt is back with us tonight, and we talked last week on concrete supports in times of need for our families. And I had read some things online, and when parents were asked to describe that protective factor of concrete supports and when things were in place for them, they say that their family can access their basic needs when they need it. Having concrete supports gives them some freedom, and we all need help sometimes. We all need the help. And I thought that was kind of an interesting point that was brought out as we did discuss a lot of the concrete supports that are available for our families. I wanted to take a second before we started to think about, I want all of our viewers to think about how many people in your life that you feel close enough to that you could share a personal problem with. And this was found with the science and people studying the families that don't have any social connections for whatever reasons, and what kind of problems that would come about without having the connections and relationships with people in your life. My name is Melissa Shamel. I'm a Special Projects Coordinator for Co-Ed for Kids, the Prevention Services. I'm here again with Anne to discuss this important protective factor, social connections. When we think about social connections, many of our families are working full-time, and we find that on their days off or an hour or two off, there's a lot of things that they're overwhelmed with as far as household chores, getting caught up with just what your children are doing that day or how their week has been. It leaves little time left for our friends and our family, and basically any chance to have some social life at all. It's kind of important. We are wired to connect with people. And when I read that about the science of the social connection, that came up that we need to be with other people. And I know sometimes for me personally, it's fuel. I mean, it's energy for me to be around people and make that connection. Those pieces in place help strengthen our families as well. So Anne's going to share with us today some of what social connection means, and then how families can connect with each other and develop some social networks. If we start with maybe about just friends and relationships, maybe how do you let somebody know in your small group or large group that you really appreciate them?
So what we look at, first of all, as we kind of are talking about just relationships in general, is that you're right, is that a lot of times we are hardwired for social relationships. We need them to function, we need them for comfort, we need them for safety. And when we're doing intervention work, especially with 3 and 4-year-olds, one of the primary things that we look at for young children is we look at their abilities to have relationships with both children and adults. And one of the things that we really focus on is that, first of all, is a child able to attach and begin to start to bond with children of their own age? And then do they have the ability to trust the predictability, the positive predictability of the adults in their lives? And that's really the foundation and the building blocks of developing supports. It starts very, very young. And then what we look at is that through time and experiences, children begin to learn what the social rules are in terms of having relationships. And then that carries us through to adulthood. So sometimes we look at sort of what people's experiences have been in terms of bonding and relating to other people. In my practice, I've worked with individuals who will tell me that, it's very hard to trust women, and they don't trust women because women talk too much, or they gossip, or they're backstabbers, or things like that. On the other hand, I'll know that some people just don't trust authority figures like police or firemen or their boss at work because they may be feeling like they can't get close to them or that they can't trust them. So one of the things that we look at in social supports are, who are those people that you trust? Who are those people that you know that predictably will be able to keep confidence, be able to not criticize you, to
Not judge.
value you and your beliefs. Those concepts are really, those are hot button topics for us because, again, we don't like to be criticized. We don't want to be hurt. We don't want to be judged. We don't want to question ourselves. So again, we want to surround ourselves with people that, again, do we trust them? And that's one of the biggest challenges is that sometimes that's a difficult process is to learn if it's someone that's established, like a family member. Folks understand sometimes that some family members are not trustworthy enough. I liked how you opened the discussion today about would you tell a private secret to somebody? Would you tell that to a family member? That's a trust exercise. Could you really do that and feel safe and secure in doing that? So one of the things that we want to look at is that how do we feel safe with other people? And again, sometimes that can be through having experiences with people. That's one of the things when we look at group work, when we look at support groups, is that support groups have rules about confidentiality, about respect, about attending to somebody who needs your help. We use those group rules in order to make sure that you feel safe and secure so that you are able to begin to build trust. So anything like a support group, I think to an extent when we are in other social groups like churches, churches are very important sometimes because not only of the spiritual concept, but also that concept of a spiritual community, a community that cares for you under whatever belief system that you have. You have similar beliefs.
Something in common.
Exactly that. Again, the fear of being judged or the fear of being rejected goes down so that you can open yourself up to those individuals. But you're right, is that when we're looking at, we need those supports in order to function properly. We need to have feedback from others, whether sometimes it's what we want to hear or sometimes it's not what we want to hear. But again, we need that feedback. We need that interaction. When we don't have that interaction, you can even see it in 3 and 4-year-olds. A lot of children that have difficulty with developing relationships, their either perception is that their environment is always hostile and aggressive. That means that they have to be hostile and aggressive, which means they have to be in a heightened sense of agitation and alert. Or that they need to hide from the world because the world is scary, and that leads into depression and anxiety, and so children withdraw. And again, we can track this this pattern of how we relate to our world around us when we become adults. Is everything dangerous? Are all people going to hurt me on some level? And how do I keep myself protected? Sometimes the best solution for some folks, they believe, is isolation. But isolation comes with its own consequences, and there are never positive consequences to isolation. So the things that we encourage people to do is to try to establish the potential one person that you feel like you can trust, that you have mutual interests in, mutual belief systems, and be able to begin to slowly relate to that person and have experiences. That's the second piece.
And you'll hear sometimes parents tell their children, if you want to have a friend, you need to be a friend.
Correct.
So you've got to make that, when you're making that connection, you got to share, listen, and talk. It's your time.
Right, and then also have experiences with them to see how that plays out. So like I said, when we do support groups have they have agendas every time they meet. It's an experience. They may talk about different topics. I know when I run support groups, we also do group activities. We get up and do things. We do different types of things like drawing, or we color, or we listen to music. We do something that's interactive, but again, it's an experience. And then we process. We learn to communicate how to process how those feelings were when we were engaging in that type of behavior. So again, it's the one thing of being able to communicate and interact with people, but then that interaction is based on, if I tell you a piece of information and I'm not judged and I'm able to feel comforted by that, will that happen again and again over time as I continue to do that kind of a behavior, disclose information to you. And that's how relationships are built.
And yeah, they're building the trust. They've got to start with building the trust.
Correct.
And I do think, as you mentioned, we need those positive relationships to help provide that continued that emotional support as well. Because sometimes when we share, we're not asking for advice, we're not asking for judging. We need to share. And I think the part of the social connection comes in with establishing those relationships, and then it becomes someone you can go to and find a way to share stories, especially when it comes to the parenting. And I think that's what, what happens to people when parents that they're in social isolation, they don't connect with people. What can happen to them? What's it look like if they're just staying in their homes and they're not in groups or participating in events with their family or alone?
A lot of times what happens to parents who isolate themselves is that there is that flavor of becoming depressed. Now, depression can look like a lot of different things. Depression can be debilitating and immobilizing, where parents will, sometimes neglect parenting duties. Or on the other hand, depression can look like anger and can look like anxiety. And that's when sometimes that emotional wave overtakes the parent. And sometimes parents don't make good decisions about their parenting styles. So sometimes we get into trouble with that. But a lot of parents that I've worked with that are in some kind of a social isolation are usually very sad and very frustrated when they're able to make contact with other people, whether it's through support groups, whether it's with a counselor or a case manager, or whether it's a family member they can trust. There's a great sense of relief, and there's almost a point of where they feel, that finally somebody understands and listens, and that then that opens them up for what can I do differently? How can I change things? Do I need to change things? And they feel that ability to start learning again. Once you start putting people into the formula, then what happens is that learning can occur and change can occur. So again, that's why we always encourage people to kind of learn from each other and be able to, again, have those experiences.
And having those connections, once you have someone you can trust and go to as a person that just listens, sometimes sharing can happen. And I think it helps with, it's an opportunity to, I know in my own social connections, it's a small group, but I share my successes, whether it's with my children or my other friends, but I can also vent when I'm angry about something. And I think that, we need to make sure we see social connection or being in a group as an opportunity to do that. We can, praise and share in the joys, but also just vent.
And then also there's the other factor of asking for help. And that's one of the most vulnerable states we can be in, is to admit that we need help. That can be terrifying for families because, again, they're afraid of all of the potential repercussions that could happen with asking for help. It means I don't know what I'm doing. It means I'm being judged. It means my belief systems are being challenged, but I know there's a problem and I don't know what to do. So again, sometimes that freezes people up. They don't know what to do, but yet they don't feel like they can or they should ask for help. And that's, again, when you have that support system, there should be that comfort that if I need help with something, I'm able to ask it in safety.
Mm-hmm. And they don't always have to go to the leader of the group or, like you were mentioning earlier, and someone in authority, whether it's a counselor, it's a peer-to-peer. I think there's a lot of advantage to peer-to-peer. I know, as anybody raising children, we all have our stories to share, and sometimes someone has had an experience similar to you, and they will share how they handled it or, what the outcome was, and they could be their encourager too, that, there's always light at the end of the tunnel.
And sometimes it's not even, if I've got really, really isolated family members or parents, one of the things I've even noticed is that even if they're in a social setting, that experience of just watching they're watching something outside of their four walls. We'll do play groups or having play dates where you'll watch families interact with their children and then someone observes that. Or if I'm in a therapeutic setting, I'll have the parents sit and they'll watch me actually play with the child or their child and see a different way of interacting with the child, because sometimes they may be too directive or they may be too disengaged. And I gotta tell you something, and sometimes it's challenging to play with a 5-year-old.
Yes.
And more lessons have done that, but that's what I mean by even just the experience of just being present, not even necessarily sharing it first, but observing, watching, sort of learning about modeling, about how people model different types of behaviors, different types of communication strategies, different types of interactions with their children. It can, even something as small as just sitting back and watching can be very, very valuable.
Yes, yes, we need to provide those opportunities because I think, what we take for granted sometimes with parenting, every child's different, situations are different, but a lot of our families handle things the way things were handled when they were young, and sometimes that might not be the best way to deal with your child. So we all need to learn some of those strategies when we're handling things in our homes. And then you can see the children carry over into their preschools or school age and classrooms. You can see, how they handle things. Are they going to want to reason things out and do problem solving, or do they get aggressive as, kind of what they see. So that's another reason why we're here to help with some of those techniques on, observing other people and how they handle things. That sounds good. And then I think when there is a good social connection present, I think it's a good for self-esteem, and a person just feels healthier and greater well-being. It's just, it's a whole mindset. But there's a lot of critical things that need to be in place too, maybe when something unexpected happens in the family. So therefore they have someone to go back to and that they can rely on once they've established some of that trust. They're just simple things. Well, I think we'll come to a close here. If there's anything else you feel like you need to add, I want to thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure. I enjoyed being with Ann these 2 sessions. COAD is the Child Care Resource Agency for 31 counties in Eastern Ohio. This broadcast is brought to you today in partnership with the Ohio Children's Trust Fund and the Eastern Ohio Regional Prevention Council, whose mission is to prevent child abuse and neglect through investing in strong communities, healthy families, and safe children. Our eastern region consists of the following 10 counties: Belmont, Carroll, Coshocton, Guernsey, Harrison, Jefferson, Monroe, Muskingum, Noble, and Tuscarawas. Thank you again for joining us today. Hopefully you'll have some couple tips that you may have heard from us. Keep an eye on our webpage, follow our social media, look at our YouTube channel, COAD for Kids. There's oftentimes other pieces of information or resources, or call out one of our offices. If you're feeling energetic and playful, add a comment in our comment section after today's session or any of our sessions. Thanks again. Thank you, Ann, and y'all have a good night. We will meet again next Wednesday, June 5th. I will have a returning guest as well, Karen Gallagher, and we will talk about bullying, and niceness is priceless is our topic next week. Thank you, and we'll see you then.